Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Stephen King podcast. This is episode 112, and I have a returning guest with me. He's known as Nzondi. You might know him from a previous podcast as Ace Antonio Hall. Hello, Nzondi. How you doing?
Hey, Jax, Lou. Thank you for having me back. I'm doing fantastic.
All right, good stuff. And as we're recording this, we're on September 1st, and you're getting ready to head back to LA, as I understand.
Yeah, I'll be heading back in 9 days.
Wow.
September 10th, I'm heading back to LA, and good old sunny LA. And it's actually the same day that my new novel's coming out, September 10th.
Awesome. And that was what, to refresh listeners' memories?
It's called Lipstick Asylum, Where the Dead Rise. It's going to be published by Omnium Gatherer Media.
All right. So I'll cover that for you in the show notes. And what we're really here to do is this is a Stephen King episode, and we're both passionate about The Stand.
Yes.
And there's been 2 versions of the book and now 2 adaptations of the book. And we're going to talk about them all and what we liked about each and every one of them or whatnot. And yeah, this is just going to be a water cooler conversation. No real structure to it.
Yeah.
There's going to be a nice little tie-in with your book for this, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I actually, before we even start, I'd like to put out there that for anyone who can answer these 2 questions, because we're going to talk about The Stand, so anyone who can answer these 2 questions, they can get a free autographed copy of my new novel, Lipstick Asylum. They just message me on my Twitter, Nzondi and the number 3, or at my IG, which is Ace Antonio Hall, number 1. So everyone knows me as Nzondi, the author formerly known as Ace Antonio Hall. So if you answer these 2 questions, if you answer these 2 questions correctly, you can get a free autographed copy of my novel, Lipstick Asylum. The first question is this. Was Roger Ebert speaking about the 1994 adaptation or the 2020 adaptation of The Stand with this comment? It's a clever idea, obviously intended to tell as much of King's story as possible without committing to a 10-season arc, but it inadvertently robs the story of its potency. We see who's in Boulder, so the danger of the journey is inherently diminished. We meet the characters after they establish new relationships, and the pleasure of seeing them deeply develop is greatly lessened. And most damningly, there's no sense of the world's descent into madness, no seeping dread, no unbearable builds of tension. Is he talking about the 94 version or the 20 version? And the second question is, which short story did Stephen King get the idea for Captain Trips for and expand his idea about an apocalyptic story? You answer those 2 questions correctly, and you'll get a free autographed copy of my new novel, Lipstick Asylum.
Awesome. All right. And that's through your Twitter account again, right?
You can do it through my Twitter at Nzondi3. If you have Facebook, it's ace.antoniohall.1. And if it's on IG, Instagram is at aceantoniohall1. You message me through any of those with the correct answer. We'll correspond. Whoever has it right, I'll send you the autographed copies of my new novel.
Oh, fantastic. And I'll include your Twitter handles when the episode drops as well. And I'll post it along with the episode on Twitter when it releases as well. So we'll have it covered from all bases. All right, let's get into it. The Stand. What's your relationship with The Stand before we get into the various versions? How long into King's library were you before you came to The Stand? Was it early, late?
That's a good question. Well, my girlfriend got me the book The Stand in 1986. It was my first year of college at University of North Florida. And I read it every single day at work. So I think that might have been my introduction to Stephen King in 1986. With The Stand. And so I just hit off, boom, loving Stephen King from that point. I think I maybe, 20 novels of his after that. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. For myself, I'm pretty sure that one I got on publication order. I came to King a bit late. I think I started with The Shining.
Ooh.
And then when I finished that, I worked back through Carrie and Salem's Lot, and then I was waiting for The Stand to come out. I hope I have the order right on that. I can't remember now if The Stand came out. Yeah, it came out after The Shining, I believe. Yeah, by then I was caught up, and then I've been a reader for life. And with every book that I read from him, you could just see that his talent was growing and growing. And then by the time we got to The Stand, and when he released the first version, we thought, my God, this is like a brick, and that was like 800 pages or whatever. and then I thought, holy cow! But man, once you fall into that book, there's just so many great characters, both good and bad. It's unbelievable.
Characters. It's a very diverse cast. I mean, it's everything. So many different types of people. It's everything and anything that you would want to see in a book as far as characterization.
Right. And then once King was a household name, and 12 years later, I guess 1990, he got to release the original version that he had, and that was over 1100.
Yeah, I have it right here. Let me see. It's 1400. Let me see right here. 1400 and 39 pages.
Okay, it's the USFF's paperback version. I have a hardcover version.
Oh, yeah,
it's 1152. Yeah, it's 1152 for me, and it's nice because it's got illustrations to it as well. Nice. What can you say about this book? That, man, it's arguably his most famous book or favorite book, though I think it kind of flip flops between this and the It for a lot of people.
Mm-hmm. I'm actually reading It right now, so I haven't finished that.
Okay. But firstly, for me, I prefer The Stand over It for various reasons. Mm-hmm. And I've talked about this previously on the podcast. I'm not a big fan of stories, and though I understand the thematic reasoning in the It, but I don't like it when characters go through a whole journey and then they don't remember it at the end. That just bugs me. Like, have you ever seen the Warren Beatty movie, Here Comes Mr. Jordan?
I have not.
No, that's the original. What was his called again? He played a football player who died prematurely in a car crash, and so then he comes back in another person's body, and he's trying to.
That's Warren Beatty?
Yeah, I can't remember the name of the movie now, but it's a remake of Here Comes Mr. Jordan. But he goes through this whole journey, and then at the end of it, he doesn't remember who he was originally. He really thinks he's the person whose body he took over. Those kind of stories just always bothered me.
You feel like you're robbed, right? You feel like...
Yeah. I understand that as the constant readers, we still carry these memories of these characters even after the story's gone, but I like the characters in the story to remember what they went through as well. Otherwise, it seems kind of, it just takes an edge off for me.
Yeah.
But I know a lot of people actually love that aspect of it that they don't remember, and that Eddie makes the ultimate sacrifice and whatnot. So yeah, The Stand, man. And it's weird that King's books, they don't ever, like, they get dated than technology and that, but every book has that, but human behavior doesn't really change that much.
Right.
And King's books keep resonating because like, you can look at The Dead Zone and the character of Greg Stilson, prototype of the populist figure, and we've seen that play out. And obviously with The Stand, we have and are having COVID.
Yeah,
it's just when you read it again now, it's really eerie.
Very.
King is so prescient about human nature.
Hey, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Imagine if George Romero, if they actually worked it out and he actually did the first adaptation of The Stand. How do you think it would have come out? Would it have been more creepier, or what do you think?
I would suspect so, given Romero's filmography. That seems to be the easy answer. But I would hope that, and it would depend how involved King would have been too, right? He was so involved with the first one. So I think King would have, and plus if it was done on TV, it would have obviously still curtailed a lot of the gore. But I think it would have had a bit of more of an edge to it than the version that we got. But yeah, it's just interesting that, like, I don't know your history with the two adaptations. Did you see the original when it came out?
I saw the original when it came out. I was there day one. I was so ready for it. Couldn't wait for it to come out. Yeah. And actually, just before this podcast on yesterday, I said, let me kind of refresh my memory a little bit. And I looked at maybe the first hour and a half of the original series, the 1994 series.
Right.
So it's really hot in my head right now.
Yeah.
So I'm really going to opine today the differences between the two.
Right.
Because it's even hotter. I'm even more passionate about the differences in the versions now than I was when we spoke last week about doing this podcast.
Right. Cool.
Yeah.
So let's just cover the books a little bit more.
Sure.
Do you have a preference between the two versions?
So I read the first version twice, maybe 20, I don't know, a long time ago. 86 was one time, and then maybe about 10 years after that. And the new version, I've never finished. So I haven't finished the new version. You know, when I say new version, the uncut version.
Right.
So I can't really, I was telling you earlier when we were talking just now, I want to go back and just start from the beginning and read the whole thing now. You know, I think it's a perfect time now, especially during the pandemic, and just to kind of read it and just really get a whole fresh approach and to see, you know, what all of the new stuff that he added. By the way, you know that the comic book series was published by Marvel Comics, right?
Yes.
So the Stand is actually in the Marvel universe.
and everything's in the King multiverse. So
yeah, exactly.
So that's why we're getting this like What If and then animated series right now. And of course, the next Spider-Man movie and the Doctor Strange movies are getting into the multiverse as well. So it's all connected, man. Yeah.
What if Christopher Walken played the first round of Flag? You didn't turn it down.
That's right. Yeah, that would have been interesting to see. It's curious about the two books. You know, I'm on record as always loving like a director's cut of whatever work. Usually, like the Lord of the Rings, I can't watch the theatrical versions anymore. I always watch the extended cuts.
Wait, why not?
Well, because I just think that the extended cuts flow better, and they actually seem to run quicker than the theatrical versions. So,
got it.
And then there's just recently in Dr. Sleep, the extended edition is half an hour longer than the theatrical cut, and it just flows.
I haven't seen the extended version.
Oh,
okay.
Yeah. You probably have to get it on the Blu-ray. I think that's the only way you can see it.
Got it.
I don't know if on streaming. I don't know. I don't have the services that stream it because I bought the Blu-ray. It's one of the last Blu-rays I bought in a while. So
I'm gonna look it up
because I just think Mike Flanagan's an amazing horror director, and I just had to have it just to listen to his commentary, if nothing else. So.
Very well done.
Yeah. And then there's probably one of the most movies that changed the most was The Abyss. I don't know if you've ever seen James Cameron's The Abyss, but
I don't remember it. I saw it. I don't remember.
That's with Ed Harris, the underwater alien movie. Wow, what a change that half hour made to the end of that movie. So, yeah. But with The Stand, I have to honestly say, because The Stand uncut version just adds a lot of stuff with the trash can man and this other character called the Kid. And the cross paths as the trash can man's moving his way to Las Vegas. And I'm a glutton for kings. He can write the longest book, and I'll read it. But in this case, I didn't really find it added that much to the story.
Oh, really?
I welcomed it, but maybe because your first impression is always the strongest. And I was carrying that 78 version around for so long that by the time this version came out, it was like, yeah, okay, that's kind of cool. But I really like the pace of the original version better. So it's kind of interesting. It's one of the few cases where I didn't go gaga over the extra material.
Yeah, but with any author, you know, it's always good to kind of get your feet back in, and if you have a chance to develop a character even more.
Sure. Yeah.
So,
oh yeah, I'm all about that. And King does characters so good, and the scenes with him and those two characters are pretty awesome. And there's the wolves as well. So yeah, it's pretty cool stuff. But
I can't wait to get into this again.
Pace-wise, it doesn't really help the story because it's already so long. It's like Wizard and Glass in the Dark Tower. Like I was zipping through those books, waiting for them to come out, and then. I mean, I love Wizard and Glass, but that was not the story I wanted. I wanted the Dark Tower story. Instead, we got the Roland flashback, it's a great story. But if you're waiting like 7-8 years at the time, that was a pretty tough pill to swallow for me. Now, I think when readers come along, they can read the whole series all in one go without having to wait years between the books. But yeah, that's the pacing issue is probably the biggest thing for me.
But for the most part, the first book pretty much did everything you wanted, and the second book kind of didn't add that much for you.
I don't think the extra 300 pages adds that much, no.
Okay.
But it's I'm still glad to have it, obviously. But, yeah, for sure. And then, of course, this was one of those books that at the time was considered unfilmable. Now it seems to be his Dark Tower series, which just can't seem to get a break right now. But
yeah,
it did finally get adapted by Mick Garris on ABC as a 3-part miniseries.
Yeah.
And not quite 6 hours. I guess it's a bit less with commercials and whatnot. But, and King had an active hand in adapting that. And he even had
5 hours and 42 minutes, I think.
Yeah. And King had a big hand in adapting that. And he also had a small role in it as well.
Yeah.
And it's dated for sure in certain aspects. But my God, that opening scene just still kicks ass. That Don't Fear the Reaper. Absolutely.
Can we talk about that?
Yeah.
So you said first impressions, like you mentioned how first impressions from the first book, and then once you already had read the second version, you already had a first impression.
Yep.
So my whole thing is about how the opening images, like you said, how they can set the tone for the entire series.
Yep.
And in some adaptations and some films, they come with a really strong ending, and you can kind of change. It kind of changes it for you. You might have been kind of like a slow drag movie. But for these two adaptations, the opening images really set the tone for the entire series, I believe. And like you said, like how your theme has the Blue Us the Colt singing, While We Shouldn't Fear the Reaper.
Yeah.
A side note, whenever I hear that song, I always hear that I think it needs more cowbell. You know that reference?
Yeah.
I always think of that now.
Yeah.
From Saturday Night Live, Christopher Walken doing that. But
the
montage shot of all the dead people in the lab.
Yeah.
Wow, Blue Us the Cold is singing, Don't Fear the Reaper. It's just so creepy and ominous. And then we see, this is in the 1994 series. So, and then we see like the Sinister Crow, when he picks the eyes out of the Raggedy Ann doll, right?
Yeah.
The Dark Crow and the Raggedy Ann. That reminds me of a line from Yeats, which I think King actually used in the original. Not this particular line, but this particular line, it says, "The blood-dimmed tide is loosed, and everywhere the ceremony of innocence is drowned." And I kind of think of that, when I see the crow, the Dark Crow, which is kind of like Randall Flagg, picking the little Raggedy Ann doll, the eyes out. Then later on, you see army vehicles running over the kids' basketball, trucks going into town, while the crow creepily overlooks from a perched vantage point how people are being dragged out of their homes at gunpoint. All of these things is the opening imagery. In the 1994 series, you get about an hour and some minutes of these different types of ways of building a suspense, which ties in. It always reminds you, like how Roger Ebert said, it always reminds you of how the world is coming to an end. And so, do you want to add to that? Because I can talk.
Nope,
I can keep talking about the opening images. So we also meet Larry Underwood, right?
Yep.
He's driving into Queens. He's listening to a song on the radio. I've forgotten how the song sounded. I'm so glad I saw it yesterday. I was like, oh, yeah. So we get to meet him, and we see that his mom is not really that excited to see him, and he's borrowed 40 grand from a loan shark. So one hit wonder. But then we get that's still as chilling. We get that he says, I'm not going to be a one hit wonder, and we know that this is the end of the world. So that is even keeping that, building that suspension, that chilling, that it's the end of the world.
Yeah.
And then we see how the doctors are standing there, and one of the doctors say, "Hey, watch this." As they're looking at one of the patients, and they just watch him die. One of the Townsies from Arnett, they just stand there and watch him die. He just dies. You look at this. Never seen it happen that quick. Then we go to Maine, and we meet Harold Lauder. All of this is like in the first 15, 20 half hour. We meet Harold Lauder with his pimples, and we see Fran when Molly Ringwald was, she was just at the height right back then, and she had that sexy midriff blouse on. And so we meet all of the characters, the main characters. We meet them all within the first half hour, and finally we meet Nick Andros, and with one of my father's favorite actresses, Ruby Dee, and then we finally meet Mother Abigail, and she's this 106-year-old woman who still makes her own bread. And she says, "The storm is coming. His storm."
Yeah.
And then we meet this terrifying scarecrow with devil red eyes that's in the image of Randall Flagg.
Yeah.
Each character was just, as a writer, you want to introduce each character with a bang. Like when the audience meets them, it's like bang. each character was introduced with a big bang, and yet they kept this string of suspense and danger and the end of the world.
Yeah.
They kept coming back with that. Kept hearing news reports, and you kept seeing the soldiers, and you kept seeing people dying and coughing. They kept it, so it really builds up this dread when you're watching this. So, and that stayed through the entire series. So
Yeah.
you start off with this dread feeling, this pit in your stomach, and it never goes away.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
Then, yeah.
And so
that was in '94. Yeah.
Yeah. For that 6-hour adaptation, obviously you can't keep all the elements of the novel, but
right.
And as we get into the later adaptation, but for the 6 hours that it had, my God, it really covered off a lot of the character stuff pretty well.
Yes.
And juggled it all quite well.
Well, who wrote the teleplay?
Yeah. Yes.
You know what I mean? Stephen King.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's right. So he did a really great job of condensing a lot of that material. I mean, yeah, you do lose a lot of the flavor of some of the characters, but that's part of the actor's job to infer that for you when you're watching it. So
yeah,
I really thought that for the limitations of the time in 1994 and being on TV, when the restrictions were much stronger than they are now in this wild west of the streaming world that we live in now, where everything goes. I mean, could you see something like The Boys on ABC on primetime? I don't think so.
Yeah, no. No.
So, and there's some hokey special effects. Unfortunately, the transformation scenes of Flag don't really hold up that well. I kind of don't mind the hand sequence at the end, but yeah, it is kind of hokey. It's sort of like that hand from that episode from Star Trek. Who mourns?
I was getting ready to mention Star Trek. We're on the same wavelength.
Yeah, who mourns for Adonis? Apollo's hand grabbing the Enterprise. It's kind of like that.
But
but
if you're a Trekkie fan like I am, all right, every time they're in, they're on a new planet, you look at the backdrop, and the backdrop is hokey.
Mm-hmm.
But it's okay. You accept it. You just accept it. And Star Trek is still one of the best science fiction series of its time, even though the backdrop is kind of hokey.
Yeah.
The story and the plot and the characters just so much outshine it that you're okay with it.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I'd rather have that than great science, sci-fi effects and special effects, and then you can't get into the story. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I guess the other problem with a TV adaptation is on the budget side is the talent that you can hire to carry out the roles. Right. And I thought for the most part the show was pretty well cast. Gary Sinise was obvious jewel that before he made it big, but that
was the first time I was introduced to him.
Yeah, but he was fantastic as Stu Redman. He was just perfect. And for me, Rob Lowe was a big surprise as Nick Andros. Yeah. And the guy that played Tom Cullen, who was coach or was on the show Coach. Yeah, Bill.
And he plays
Fagerback.
He's the voice of he's the voice of what is that cartoon?
SpongeBob. Yeah, he's the starfish. I don't remember the name of the character, but yeah.
Yeah.
And I liked Matt Frewer as Trash Can Man. I thought he was pretty good.
Yeah.
And like you said, Ruby Dee was great as Mother Abigail. So, but the rest of the cast they were okay.
And Molly Ringwald, come on now.
I didn't really like her interpretation of the character, but yeah. But and the other thing that I liked quite a bit actually was the soundtrack by Ry Cooder. I love that acoustic guitar. I thought it was fantastic.
Yeah,
but
it was a beautiful sound. It was a great soundtrack.
I know for some people that got on their nerves after a while, but no, I really enjoyed that series. And again, that opening scene just is just one of the most perfect encapsulations of a piece of Stephen King writing that I don't think we'll ever see anything like on that level again. So it's dated. But yeah, man, it still holds up. If you love the characters, then out of the two, this is definitely the version to watch.
Well, let's talk about the other version. How does the other version open up? The 2020 version, how does that open? They jumped pretty much to book 2. I mean, the first thing you hear is Mother Abigail.
Yeah.
And you hear her words, warning that the Dark Man will fight all who stand against him, and God wants him to fight back, that kind of thing. So the very first thing you introduce is the theme of the good versus evil. That's right in the forefront, which to me, I don't know. To me, that's kind of hokey. It opens up with the men in the hazmat suits entering the building in Boulder, Colorado. Right. So you do see some cool images.
Which basically killed all the tension that was created in the first one. So the quote that you read off the top of the show is pretty accurate, and I think that issue happened for a lot of people. And I have a separate issue with this because I heard Josh Boone interview, and I've mentioned this several times on the podcast, do an interview with Kevin Smith. Mm-hmm. He's on Hollywood Babylon, his podcast, and they were talking about adapting The Stand and all that before they started, and he talked. Boone talked about his relationship with King and how, his parents were very strict and they wouldn't let him read the books. And then he wrote a letter to King, and King sent him a whole box of the books. And then his parents relented, right? And he talked about The Stand and what was important about it, all that. And then this version came out, and it was such a twisted stop go version of the book, and I was really disappointed,
right, because they did a lot of flashbacks.
And he said he didn't want to copy the original miniseries, but I just didn't understand that. Like, you can still make it your own. You don't have to go beat for beat. You just emphasize different things. And this version, because it, like, The Stand is, well, it's like 4 books really, but the first part of the story is, like you said, this, which the original miniseries did so well, was this building tension of this disaster, and you want to see that. But in this version, they jumped past it, so that all that tension's gone. So then you're left waiting for the show to catch up to you.
Yeah. The challenge, I think, in doing the adaptation the second time, he said he didn't want to do the same story over again. So that's a challenge.
Yes.
Do you think that in the back of his mind, I mean, this is cheating creativity, but do you think in the back of his mind, he thought that the people already know this part of the story, the building tension. I want to move to this part. I want to explore this part of the story. And that may be why he skipped it. I don't know. Right.
Maybe that's possible. I'm wondering if there was an element of, because COVID was kicking in at that point, and maybe they were sensitive to that issue. I'm also thinking that it's been a heavily used device in a lot of TV shows over the last 10 years or so. Of course, with Lost, the most famous example of that type of storytelling.
Yeah.
So that the flashback has become very popular as a way of building tension. But the problem was, again, the flashback structure that they gave away all the questions that you were having back in the past. So, like, when you saw Stu Redman and Franny, you already knew that they were going to get together later on.
The flash forward. Yeah, they did the flash forward, then they did the flashback. Yeah.
Because we saw them together, and then they would flash back to.
Right.
If you're gonna do that, then make us think that Molly might actually be hooking up with Harold, like, so that when we go back, we don't know which way she's going to go, but we knew which way she was going to go. So, like, again, there's no tension there. So it took like 4 episodes we were ahead of the story because we already knew what had happened already. We knew that the plague had killed everybody off, and we knew everybody was in Boulder. We knew everybody else was in Vegas. So we were waiting for the series to get to that point in the story. So, okay, now show us what happens when they have to make the stand.
Lou. One of the parts that really irritated me about that part is it starts off with her saying to her father, I need to talk to you about something. And we never find out what it is that she needs to talk to him about.
Yeah.
Do you remember that?
Yeah, I thought he wanted to talk to her about being pregnant.
Right, but we don't know that. We find that out later. Right. You know that from the book. But if you never read the book, you would not know that because it's never mentioned.
Yeah.
I don't know if they hit the cutting room floor or what, but that irked me, that part.
Yeah. And the other thing that is interesting is that this was 10 episodes. And so they had a lot more time to develop characters.
Yeah.
But I feel that the characters were better developed in the 1994 series, which had just over half the running time of what this new version did. 2 of the characters that really got shortchanged for me were Nick Andros and Tom Cullen. They just felt like extras.
Right, yeah.
They were barely in it, and it was really disappointing that...
Well, with Josh Boone, was it Josh Boone, right? Josh Boone?
Yep.
I think they made the conscious decision to focus on Harold Lauder and Franny Goldsmith. And they did from the very beginning, really. And it's like a narrative through there almost about them mostly. Mm-hmm. And by doing that, I think we lose the development of all the other characters and how great those characters were that Stephen developed in The Stand.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, for sure. So, and then in this one, the casting is actually generally pretty good. I did like most of some of the characters, like I mentioned, Nick's character, never really got to know him, so I can't really tell how good the actor was or not.
Right.
Whoopi Goldberg was okay as Mother Abigail, but the translocation of her from her farm to a nursing home it's just not the same, right? Like it's just kind of like
it's not. Yeah.
That just didn't really work for me.
It made it more impersonal.
Yeah. Yeah, and probably the worst bit of casting, or the piece of casting that didn't work for me, was the one that they did for Stu, because the actor, is it Marsden?
Is that his name, James Marsden?
Yeah, he's not a leading man character. I mean, the guy's he's a handsome guy, good looking guy, but he's not a Gary Sinise. He doesn't have the acting range. You know what I mean?
No,
like he
yeah. You know what? Part of it is again how he was introduced to us in the story.
Yeah.
We see Stu from the very beginning. Now, it was a little different from the book, because Stu in the book was a little bit more fearful.
Yeah.
But in the adaptation, we see from the very beginning, the guys are in the gas station talking and jiving, and he's standing there looking out into the night and just very calm and cool. And he's, hey, you need to turn the pumps off. Very cool, And then he runs and turns it off. So from the very beginning, we see this inner strength and this charisma from the very beginning. And then we see the badassery that he has when he's held in the lab. And we just jump right with James Martin. We jump right to that. And he didn't come across like, you're right. He didn't come across with that same type of charismatic badassery,
right?
That Gary Sinise executed in his role.
Yeah, and again, we meet him. He's already in isolation in the CDC, and we find out through conversation that all his friends are dead, and it's kind of like, okay, that's pretty, that's pretty telly. That's not very emotionally engaging. So
right,
it was just like they took the weirdest shortcut, and I've watched it and I still can't. We're like, where the heck did all this 10 hours of airtime go to? Like, they just didn't seem to cover much of the story.
Yeah.
I was really hoping that the piece that they left out in the original miniseries with Nick coming back as a ghost to help Tom, bring Nick back to Boulder after breaking his leg.
I thought they were going to do that.
Yeah, I really thought that's a piece of the story that we could really sink our teeth into, but they didn't do that.
No.
And the actor that played Glenn Bateman, actually both actors they cast, I liked both of them. Ray Walston from the original one, who was, because I'm dating myself, he was on My Favorite Martian back in the 60s, the black and white comedy show. I always loved him. He's a great character actor, and I think he was in The Sting too. And then, of course, we got Greg Kinnear. Yeah. Kinnear, yes. He was good. He was really good.
Yeah, he was.
He probably had the most memorable personality of anybody in the series. And I'm fully for recasting. Like, I think Ralph Brentner was recast as a woman. I have no problem with that. And obviously Larry Underwood underwent the biggest change. And in retrospect, that's really probably the way the character should have been portrayed initially. But
because he was a white guy that had a soulful voice.
Yeah, exactly.
He even said to his mother, because I just saw it yesterday. He even said to his mother, when he was sitting at the table, "Got that brown sound." He even said that.
Yeah.
I didn't catch that before.
Ouch.
Yeah.
Ouch. 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 Yeah.
One of the things that I think they didn't, the second series didn't capitalize on. So have you seen Joker?
No, I have not.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So I just recently, my girlfriend and I just recently this weekend watched Disney's Cruella. Okay.
Oh yeah.
101 Dalmatians, Cruella. Mm-hmm. So with the villain in both Joker and Cruella, they spend a lot of time developing the character so that you can really sympathize with that character and where they came from. So it's really great development.
Right.
With Harold, they didn't spend in the adaptation, in the second adaptation, they didn't really spend a lot of time developing him like that. I mean, when we first meet him, he's like peeping Tom, and he gets caught and he gets beat, punched, and he flees. So the first time we see him is he's weak. And then in the 1990 version, he presents Fran with a copy of a book of his published poetry, thinking that that's going to get him a date, because he asked her out. And she said, and she turns him down. So here's a great thing he's done, and it still doesn't get him a date. We kind of sympathize with him. In the newer version, he gets a rejection letter. most people can't sympathize with that. They don't,
Yeah.
unless you're a writer. He puts it along with a whole bunch of rejection letters. So he's weak.
Yeah.
He gets beat up by the kids. One thing that was creepy is his bike kind of trips over a head. I think it's a woman's head that was being eaten by a crow. That's when he tripped. His bike flips over that. But we don't really sympathize with him. We think he's creepy and angry. We just don't sympathize with him. So they had the opportunity to develop that character because it's mostly about him throughout the whole thing, and they missed that opportunity. They didn't use the Joker Cruella formula to really help the audience sympathize.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Well, they didn't do that with a lot of the characters.
Well, yeah.
To be honest, that was Harold Lauder was Owen Teague, who was also an It.
Yeah.
He's a good actor. So, and I, as a writer, you're probably going to agree with what I say, or maybe I don't know. You think I'm blowing smoke, but I've come to realize that over the years, there's a lot of good actors out there. I mean, there's some really obviously great ones, like Daniel Day-Lewis or Laurence Olivier or whatever. Like there's some really top-notch actors, but there's a lot of good actors. There's not a lot of good writers. And writing is the hardest part of the creative process because that's where you have to stay true to the story, have a vision. And the problem, and the big problem with movies and TV series is it's a writer's room. So it's a team collaboration.
Yes.
It's a lot harder to have a unified vision unless the head writer's a really strong personality.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, sometimes a single vision can go off in avenues that maybe are best left unexplored, like that. The ritual scene of Chud and King's It, but you can get a lot of people that are good actors, but you can't really find a lot of good writers that can you can name on your hand how many great TV series there have been over the ages, but how many great actors have there been? Way more. And I think the vision, like we talked about this already, but the vision for the show of not wanting to copy the original and going to this flashback just really hobbled or kneecapped the series. It just killed so much dramatic tension because, the story takes you you go through the play and then it's this dash for survival. And then when you get to this rest place in Boulder and whatnot, you have a chance to catch your breath, and these characters we get to see them in a non-life-threatening situation, so we get to see them interact on a normal basis, so they build their bonds again. But then, but the tension's still there in the background. They still have to deal with Randall Flagg.
Yeah.
But when you chop it up like that, like they did here with these flashbacks, there's no tension.
There's no tension. I think part of it is this. I will not agree with you that there aren't a lot of good writers out there as far as Hollywood and screenwriting. But what I will say is this. They don't have the same kind of power that a novelist has because there are so many hands in the pot.
Yep.
So you write, like you said, a lot of TV shows have a writing room, and so anywhere from 6 to 10 different writers. It's usually on that episode, it's usually a main writer, an assistant writer, and then everybody else kind of help mold it. But then you also have the director. You also have the actor who brings his own. And a lot of times I've been on set with a lot of different actors, like, I won't name any names, but a lot of different actors. And they say, hey, I wouldn't say it that way. I'd say it this way. So you have that, you have that. And then you have the editor who can edit a scene and make the whole scene completely different from what, the writer, how the writer wrote it down just by the way they edited it. So all those different entities, I think, and the chopping it up, I think kind of changes, what the screenwriter, the teleplay writer might have intended. Yeah. Wherein Stephen King, there's a reason why a lot of novelists don't write screenplays. It's kind of like being a doctor and a lawyer. It's really two different. It's two different. Really it's different. Yeah. But if you have the genius and the intuitiveness and the imagination that a Stephen King has, you can pull it off, I guess, as a teleplay, because you keep your hands in the pot. Like, no, I need to keep this string of suspense in the story continuously. So him being there kept things the way it was supposed to because he knew the book better than anyone. Right. And you kind of lose that, a lot of times with an adaptation. Most times with an adaptation. Right. So I won't say there aren't good writers. I won't say that, but I will say that they lose a lot of power. They lose a lot more power. Yeah. I hear you. That's probably a better way of putting it. Yeah.
I just find that usually when you watch something and you're dissatisfied with it, it's usually not the acting performance. It's just usually how the story is resolved or whatnot. So that's the point I was trying to make there.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah. So where else can we go with this? Comparing the flags, I thought Alexander Skarsgård was just as good, if not better, than Jamie Sheridan from the original series. Obviously, he has the benefit of...
Ooh, a lot of people would disagree with you with that.
Maybe, but he has Skarsgård had the benefit of better effects. So
yeah,
but that whole scene with the breaking the guy out of jail with giving him the stone that turns into the key. That in the original miniseries that was just done so beautifully. In this version, there was more flash to it, but it was just kind of underwhelming. I don't know. It's just. But that's kind of the undertone of this whole series is underwhelming. And for a story this powerful, that's a vision problem.
Yeah, I think the original Randall Flagg was played so wonderfully, so creepy, so sinister. And Skarsgård, I think, was more comical. Unbelievable. Now, Skarsgård himself, I love, especially the last recent things that he's been in, Castle Rock, and just the last few things he's been in, I thought was just absolutely amazing.
That's his brother.
Oh, that's right. That's right. Never mind. Never mind.
Alexander was in True Blood.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Never mind. I feel like Rosanna Downer. Never mind.
Yeah. No, that's good. That's cool. And I have two big main things I still want to talk about. Like
what?
The finale in the hotel. Oh. I hated the staging of that. Like it was all done interior.
Yeah.
They were all in like this pool area or whatever of the hotel. So
right.
It should have been outdoors.
Yeah.
And I did like the cloud effect that they used to make it look like the hand of God wrapping around the building. But the problem is nobody inside the building got to see that. And I think that's part of this.
Defeats the purpose.
It defeats the purpose. So the only people that saw that, and I realized everybody there died, but it's just in that moment. I wanted those people to see that there was something beyond what was going on there. But
so did you think Trash Can Man was over the top?
Yes, terribly over the top.
Yeah.
And that was played by the guy's The Flash. What's his name?
I just thought it was over the top. It was like,
it was horribly over the top. Yeah. Ezra Miller.
Oh, Ezra Miller. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Compared to Matt Frewer. Yeah, compared to Matt Frewer's version of it. And they just missed so many great moments with that character too, like the Cibola thing and, walking down the highway towards Las Vegas and all that. That's just, yeah.
So, but okay, so I can't critique it. I can't be too harsh on it being over the top because of this. How people talk about DC and Marvel. I've broken down why Marvel was so successful in their film world versus DC. In my opinion, pretty much because it's changing now, but in the comic books, the DC characters are very serious.
Yep.
It's changed now in the last decade, I guess. But Superman was serious, Batman was serious. All of them are all the leaders were serious. Aquaman was serious. They're all pretty serious.
Yeah.
And the villains were over the top.
Right.
So, but when they translated that to film, the Joker, all of these guys were over the top. You couldn't really get into the superhero, Superman, and all these guys because they just didn't have any personality. And in Marvel, you get like an Iron Man.
No sense of humor.
Yeah, no sense of humor. But Iron Man, these guys are sarcastic and a playboy. Everyone was kind of had a lot.
Yep.
So maybe the Trash Can Man, you see certain sci-fi films and certain horror films where it is over the top and it's stylistic. It's stylistic. You still appreciate it because it just adds to the texture of the film.
Right.
And maybe that was the goal for Ezra Miller's performance or the way his performance was written. I don't know. I just seeing it though, it just threw me off a little bit. I'm like, whoa.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it wasn't like he might have been giving the directors exactly what they asked for, but it wasn't. It didn't mesh with the rest of the tone of the series. So, I think again, there's a problem of overall vision of what they were trying to do with the show. So that's my take on Ezra. Yeah, so that people chuckle about the finale from the original series, like that Hand of God. We've mentioned the Hand of Star Trek there, but
right.
At least it played out like it did in the way it did in the book, the staging and everything, having all the people there.
Right.
And I just found overall that the people that were in Las Vegas were more one note, bad people, as opposed to in the original where it was a mix more.
Mm-hmm.
Some people were just misguided, or they weren't really bad people, but they, for whatever reason, they just gravitated to one side over the other. And I think that subtlety was lost in the new version. Everybody was just mean and nasty.
Right. If you have that kind of complexity of the characters where, the different levels, textures, again, the word texture comes up, it just adds more flavor.
Mm-hmm.
To the scene, as opposed to that one note of everyone's just following suit, being bad and nasty.
Yeah, right. And my expectations were that given that this was on a streaming service with greater freedom, that we would have got more nuanced characterizations of the two parties, and that we didn't really get that at all. It was pretty black and white, which was disappointing. So there wasn't much, like you said, texture to that at all. That's not easy to do. And comes to a lot down to the writing, and again, all the parts have to be in sync. And if they're just trying to get something done, then the easiest route is usually what ends up being put on the screen. So
that's a shame.
Yeah, for sure. And then we have probably the biggest draw for me was the Coda episode, which was King's. When he originally finished The Stand, he didn't have a satisfactory answer to the question about whether or not people could ever change. And he just, they just ended up with the I don't know, which in a way is human nature. So I really didn't mind that any too much. But in this last episode, he wrote this whole coda with Fran and Stu sort of had set off on their own, and she fell down the well, and
oh, yeah.
And Flag was offering her up, saving her baby if she would, or saving her so her baby wouldn't die. So if she would bow down to him. And again, it was like a mini encapsulation of the entire story of that she had to make a choice or a stand between choosing good or evil. And she ends up making the harder choice.
Yeah.
I thought it was okay. Again.
Okay. Guilty pleasure.
Yeah.
That was my favorite part of the whole series.
Oh, okay. It kind of reminds the extra material from the uncut version of the novel. It adds some texture in that, but it also runs into that territory of the Phantom Menace from Star Wars when they started trying to explain where the Force came from and started bringing up the idea of midichlorians and that. It just kills the magic.
I got you.
The best art is the ones that have the weave is
leave it to your imagination.
The weave is open at the end, so that they allow it for your interpretation as to take that. And I didn't mind it, but I also wasn't super impressed with it either. So
yeah,
and it's frustrating. But I've again, this is a realization I had that you're only going to get something special in a movie or TV or something like maybe once every 20 years. You go back, like now it's almost 20 years, Lord of the Rings. Like what great movies has we really had since then that's going to be a cultural milestone? And before Lord of the Rings, there was 2001, I guess, a Star Wars, the original trilogy,
Yeah.
So yeah, like it just doesn't happen that very often. So when it does happen,
no, it doesn't.
It's like, to me, something like Mike Flanagan's adaptation of Dr. Sleep is, unfortunately, it's an overlooked classic, because I thought it was a classic as soon as I saw it. I did too. He's got such a great eye for directing horror. He knows the angles.
Mm-hmm.
He knows how to build tension. He always does that funky shot with the character lying horizontally, but the picture being vertical. That's like a trademark shot that he gets into every movie. I'm really looking forward to his new series come on Netflix, Midnight Mass.
Oh, I don't know about that.
Yeah, so that looks interesting. Okay. And his two, like The Haunting of Hill House, again, I thought was another classic. And Bly Manor was really strong. It was I think people were expecting another ghost story, but it turned out to be a love story.
It was different. It was different.
It was still good.
It was still good. It was a little harder to follow.
Yeah.
It was a little harder to follow, but it was still very good. Yeah.
Yeah.
You know what? So you mentioned, so The Shining. So when you mentioned The Shining, okay, so I made the mistake of reading The Shining after I saw the movie. I saw the movie, when it first came out, and I just finished the book maybe last year or something like that, maybe the year before, last year.
Right.
I love the book. I thought the book was so much better than the movie, and I was upset that they killed off the character. I'm like, hey, he dies in the movie. He doesn't die, you know.
Yeah.
But with The Haunting of Hill House, ooh, people are gonna kill me. I love you, Shirley Jackson. I should have read that first. First. But the director, what's his name again? That did
Mike Flanagan.
Mike Flanagan did the series so well. Remember that one shot that was like 10 minutes long? He did it so well that when I read the book after, and when I finished the book, my friends can tell you, I was on set when I finished the book. I got to the last page and it didn't feel like the movie. And I threw the book, I threw the book in the air like, what? Because I felt like they didn't capture it the way that the movie captured it.
Yeah.
And that was my fault because I know it's a classic and it was so, and I remember reading the first 15, 20 pages like, oh my gosh, Shirley Jackson is a genius. You know, just the way that she, just her description, just the way that she wrote was just so beautiful.
Yeah.
But that was the one time that I read a book and I liked the adaptation better.
Yeah.
You know, and it's probably because like the new kids today think The Exorcist is not scary. It's probably kind of like that, you know. Yeah. Where it is, to me, The Exorcist is probably one of the scariest movies ever. But, you know, I guess you would have had to have seen it in the 70s or the 80s whenever it came out to really be able to appreciate it like that.
Absolutely.
You know, because we're so desensitized to things now.
Yeah, it's like John Carpenter's The Thing. You know, that's pre-CGI. It's all practical effects. I just think that movie's fantastic, but I know like younger people watch it and they laugh at it and say, oh, those special effects are so fake looking. And I'm going,
yeah.
I know, man. That's... it still works for me.
You gotta get past that.
It still works for me.
Yeah.
So it's just your expectations are that anytime something that's been adapted a long time ago is going to be redone, that it'll be so much better because movie audiences are more sophisticated, writing's getting better, special effects obviously are getting better. But if there's not a combined vision, it just doesn't come together sometimes. And unfortunately, that's what I think happened with this new adaptation.
So it sounds like we're in agreement with which adaptation was better.
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah. The 94 is way better, even though it's hokier in terms of production values, but the characters are just so much more developed and explored. Yeah, for sure. So that's a bummer, but I don't know. I think I asked you before that we decided to do this, if you had a chance to see Lisey's story yet.
No, I mean, wait, you said see it? Is it out?
Yeah.
It
was out on Apple TV.
Oh, that's why it's on Apple TV. That's why.
Yeah, because King again adapted the book, wrote all the episodes, screenplays, and overall, it turned out to be really well done. There's a dreamy quality to it that I think hurts it a little bit, but that's part of the story too, right? Because when you go over to Booyah Moon, I don't know if you've read the book.
I'm looking at it right now. I just pulled it out of my library. I'm on page 153 of the book. So I have a long way to go.
Yeah. But the great thing with that series is the back half of it is stronger than the first half, and it's always important to stick the landing. So I really ended up liking that adaptation. So that's pretty good. And
it's on Apple TV. Okay.
Yeah, so it's definitely worth checking out, and that's one of King's favorite stories, and that's why he held on to that, because he wanted to be involved in the adaptation of that one.
So if he was involved in it, then because just how we spoke about how he was involved in the original adaptation of The Stand, I feel really good about it then.
Yeah.
Okay.
You gotta find some time to read his two latest books that came out this year, Later and Billy Summers. So you got some good reading ahead of you. Well, I'll tell you that.
I got some good reading ahead. Absolutely. Yeah.
All right. Well, I think that's everything I had to talk about with all these versions of the stands. Is there anything you wanted to add to it?
No, that's pretty much it.
All right.
The opening sequences of the 1994 really just laid out the entire series and made it very enjoyable because they took time developing the characters and building suspense and dread, and I think that's really very important. You can't shortcut that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You have to have that vision. And when I do these podcasts, I try to be positive about everything that I'm talking about, but sometimes you also have to be honest. And I I don't want to rag on whatever happened. There was other factors involved with why the new version turned out the way it did. I'm sure they had the best of intentions. They had a lot of good people,
Look, let me put out a disclaimer.
involved with
Let
it.
me put a disclaimer out right now, because I always say this when I'm criticizing something. So here's the disclaimer. Anyone that puts anything out in this universe, right, and I haven't done it, I have to respect it creatively, because I would have loved to have been the person who wrote the adaptation and it got, put out. I would have loved that. Are you kidding me? So to be able to put it together, to finish it, to complete it, to get $100,000 million budget, and to get all these big names behind it, that alone is magical. So we can kind of, I can sit back and say, hey, I like strawberry ice cream more than butter pecan, but that doesn't necessarily mean that butter pecan is not incredible of its own. So
right.
I just want to say that
art is subjective for sure. I mean, some people will probably like this new version better than the old version. Just absolutely, it depends what point in the time you're in your lifeline. Like if you're much younger, to watch the original miniseries might be death for you. I know I have the same thing. I went through the same thing with Star Trek. Like everybody now, everybody's Star Trek is now Star Trek: The Next Generation, but I'm old school. I was the original series, and it still will be my favorite version.
Yeah.
Even though I know that Next Generation on pretty well almost any category is a higher quality than the original series, but it comes down to those characters again, man. Like I just, it's like Stephen King says, give them to me when they're young and they're mine for life. So
yes, I love it.
Well, man, it was a blast talking to you about this. I want to thank you for taking the time out to do this.
Hey, I really appreciate you having me back. This is fantastic. Thanks for having me back.
Not a problem. Yeah. Not a problem. I wish you all the best with your new book, Lipstick Asylum.
Coming out September 10th, Lipstick Asylum, Where the Dead Rise.
All right. Yeah, that's right. And don't forget that contest. Go back to the beginning and listen to those questions. I don't think it's too tricky, but we'll see.
You know the answers to those questions, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, the first one became apparent after a couple.
Yeah. So that's
once you got into it. Yeah. But we won't blow it just in case somebody here, And you're off to LA to. What's your plans when you're down there?
Yeah. So my day job, I'm a stand-in actor, and I'm obligated to a couple of TV shows. One starts at the end of September.
Oh, okay.
And matter of fact, the assistant director just called me last night to give me all the tidbits of our schedule. So I'll be, it's one of those shows where I can't even talk about it or name it. I'm contractually,
oh, really?
Yeah. But so we start that the end of September. And so, I'll be back September 10th, kind of hang out for 10 days and, get started on that TV show that we'll be shooting in LA. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah. Well, hopefully it won't be too smoky for you down there.
Oh, wait, what do you mean? Like fires?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. I hope not.
Yeah.
Hey, man, God bless everyone out there. That's,
yeah,
and
for
be
sure.
safe out there.
Yeah. You need a mask for more than just COVID out there, from what I hear. But
yeah. Cool.
All right. You take care, man, and I look forward to having you back on again.
Hey, well, next time we'll break down characters. I don't know. We'll talk about something.
Yeah, for sure.
Something in the Keen universe.
Yeah.
I love it.
You go read those 2 books, and we'll go talk about them.
Will do. Hey, yes, sir.
Right.
Jax Lou. Thank you, sir.
Not a problem. Take care, man. Till next time.
All right. Talk to you.
Okay. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.